"You're going to sleep in the kitchen. Don't you dare leave until everything's ready, bitch," Samantha said, her voice dripping with venom as she pointed toward the cramped space behind the counter. My son Michael nodded in agreement, not even bothering to look at me. I stood there for a moment, my 70-year-old hands trembling slightly, before I simply nodded and said, "Of course, dear. That's how my Thanksgiving began this year."
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
Standing in my son's kitchen at 10 o'clock at night, staring at the mountain of vegetables that needed chopping, the 20-pound turkey that needed stuffing, and the endless list of side dishes that somehow became my responsibility. 30 relatives were coming tomorrow, and apparently I was the only one capable of making it happen. I'm Patricia Williams, and I'm 65 years old. I raised Michael by myself after his father died in a car accident when Michael was only 8. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to make sure he had everything he needed. I put him through college, helped with his wedding, gave them the down payment for this very house we were standing in. And now, here I was, being called a bitch by my own daughter-in-law while my son watched in silence. Samantha had always been cold toward me, but lately it was getting worse. Much worse. Tonight felt different, though. There was something in her eyes, something almost gleeful about reducing me to this level. She stood there in her designer pajamas, arms crossed, watching me tie an apron around my waist like I was her personal servant. "Make sure the turkey is perfect," she continued, her voice taking on that fake sweet tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "Michael's colleagues from the law firm will be here, and I won't have them thinking we can't provide a proper meal. We," as if she'd be lifting a finger. "And Patricia," she added, using my name like it left a bad taste in her mouth, "try not to get in our way tomorrow. The guests are important people. They don't need to be bothered by, well, you know." I knew. I was an embarrassment, a burden, an old woman who should be grateful for whatever scraps of tolerance they threw my way. Michael finally spoke up, but not to defend me. "Mom, just do what Samantha asks, okay? We've got a lot riding on tomorrow." My heart broke a little more. This was the same boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who cried when I couldn't afford the expensive sneakers his classmates wore, the one who promised me he'd always take care of me when I got old. I began chopping onions, and I told myself that's why tears were running down my face. The kitchen was small and cramped, nothing like the spacious one I'd had in my own home before I sold it to help them with their mortgage payments 3 years ago. Now I lived in a tiny apartment across town, surviving on Social Security and the occasional odd job, while they lived in comfort thanks to my sacrifices. As I worked through the night, I could hear them upstairs, laughing, watching television, going about their evening as if there wasn't an elderly woman downstairs doing all their work. Around midnight, I heard Michael's voice drift down. "Thank God Mom's handling all this." I wouldn't know where to start. Samantha's response chilled me to the bone. "Don't worry, honey. After tomorrow, we won't have to deal with this anymore." What did that mean? I stopped chopping and listened harder, but they'd moved away from the stairs. My hands shook as I returned to the vegetables. There was something about the way she'd said it, something final and threatening that made my stomach clench with fear. By 3 in the morning, I had most of the prep work done. The turkey was stuffed and ready for the oven. Vegetables were chopped and waiting in the refrigerator. Pie crusts were made from scratch. My back ached terribly, and my feet were swollen from standing for hours, but I couldn't stop yet. There was still so much to do. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the small kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of my labor. This was my life now, being treated like hired help by the family I'd sacrificed everything for. But as I sat there in the quiet darkness, something unexpected happened. Instead of the usual crushing sadness I'd grown accustomed to, I felt something else stirring. It started small, just a tiny flame of something I hadn't felt in years: anger. Real, honest anger at the injustice of it all, at being dismissed and diminished by people who owed me everything, at watching my son choose his wife's cruelty over his mother's love, at being made invisible in my own family. I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in months. I checked my bank balance, looked at some old documents I kept in my purse, and made a few mental calculations. Then I did something that surprised even me. I made a phone call. "Hello, this is Patricia Williams," I whispered into the phone. "I'd like to book a flight to San Diego for this morning. Yes, I know it's early. Yes, it's urgent." As I hung up the phone, I felt that flame of anger growing stronger. For 37 years, I'd been the perfect mother, the selfless grandmother, the woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. Tomorrow, 30 hungry relatives would come looking for their perfect Thanksgiving feast, but I wouldn't be here to serve it. I looked around the kitchen one last time, at all the food I'd prepared, at the home I'd helped them buy, at the life I'd built for them at the expense of my own dignity. Then I walked upstairs to where they slept peacefully, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking at the closed door of Michael and Samantha's bedroom. Behind that door slept the son I'd raised alone, the boy I'd given everything to. As I stood there in the dim hallway, memories flooded back like a dam had burst open in my mind. Michael was 8 when his father died. I remember that awful phone call, the one that shattered our world in an instant. David had been coming home from his second job at the warehouse when a drunk driver ran a red light. One moment I was a wife and mother living a normal life. The next, I was a widow with a traumatized little boy and a mountain of medical bills. The life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. David had always meant to increase the policy, but we were young and thought we had time. We always thought we had time. Those first few years were the hardest of my life. I worked as a secretary during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. Michael would do his homework at the cleaning company's office while I worked, falling asleep on the waiting room couch more nights than I care to remember. When he got older, he'd help me empty trash cans and vacuum floors, never complaining, always understanding that this was what we had to do to survive. I never dated again. There were opportunities, men who showed interest, but I couldn't risk bringing someone into Michael's life who might not love him the way he deserved. Every decision I made was about him. Every sacrifice was for his future. When he graduated high school as valedictorian, I cried tears of pride and exhaustion. The college acceptance letters started arriving, but so did the reality of tuition costs. State school would have been manageable with loans and financial aid, but Michael had been accepted to Northwestern, his dream school, the prestigious law program that would open doors I could never give him myself. I remortgaged the house, took out personal loans, worked 3 jobs for 4 years, barely sleeping, just to make sure he could graduate debt-free and focus on his studies instead of worrying about money like I had to. He called me every week during college, telling me about his classes, his friends, his plans for the future. "Mom, I'm going to take care of you when I graduate," he'd say. "You'll never have to work so hard again. I promise." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. After law school, Michael got a position at a prestigious firm in the city. I was so proud. I called everyone I knew. My son, the successful lawyer. All those years of sacrifice had been worth it. That's when he met Samantha. She was everything I wasn't. Young, beautiful, educated, from a wealthy family. Her parents owned a chain of restaurants, and she'd never wanted for anything in her life. When Michael brought her home to meet me, I could see the calculation in her eyes as she took in my small house, my second-hand furniture, my worn hands that showed years of hard labor. She was polite that first meeting, but distant, cold. I told myself she was just nervous, meeting her boyfriend's mother for the first time. But as their relationship progressed, the coldness never thawed. The wedding was an elaborate affair that cost more than I made in 2 years. Samantha's parents paid for most of it, making sure everyone knew they were the ones making it possible. My contribution was relegated to a small footnote. Patricia made the beautiful wedding favors by hand. 300 little sachets of lavender that took me months to sew. Each one perfect, each one made with love for my son's big day. But it was what happened during the wedding planning that really showed me where I stood in Samantha's world. I wasn't consulted on anything important: the venue, the menu, the guest list. When I suggested adding some of Michael's childhood friends to the invitation list, Samantha smiled tightly and said, We're trying to keep it sophisticated, Patricia. I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. I wasn't sophisticated enough for her world. After they married, the changes in Michael were gradual but unmistakable. The weekly phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. He stopped asking my advice about anything. When I'd call him at work, his secretary would always say he was in a meeting or with a client. When I'd try his cell phone, he'd text back that he was busy and would call me later. But later never came. 3 years ago, when they said they were struggling with their mortgage payments, I didn't hesitate. I sold my house, the one David and I had bought when Michael was a baby, the one filled with 30 years of memories. I gave them the proceeds to pay off their debt and moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. "It's just temporary, Mom," Michael had said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just until we get back on our feet." But I was the one who never got back on my feet. Living on Social Security in a neighborhood where I knew no one, watching my savings dwindle month by month while they lived in comfort in the house my sacrifice had saved. The visits became fewer. The invitations to family gatherings stopped coming. When I did see them, it was always at their convenience, always with the understanding that I was grateful for whatever time they could spare me. Standing in that hallway now, I realized that Samantha hadn't just married my son. She'd systematically erased me from his life, and he'd let her do it. Worse, he'd helped her. I walked quietly to my purse and pulled out the manila folder I always carried with me. Inside were documents I'd kept from the house sale. Papers I'd never really looked at carefully because I'd trusted Michael to handle everything honestly. But as I read through them now by the dim hallway light, my hands began to shake for a different reason than exhaustion. According to the deed transfer documents, I hadn't simply given them money to pay off their mortgage. The paperwork showed that I'd purchased a 60% stake in their house. I was listed as a co-owner, not a benefactor. Michael had never told me this. Neither had the lawyer who handled the paperwork. For 3 years, I'd been living in a cramped apartment, struggling to pay rent, while I actually owned most of the house they were living in. My son had lied to me. They both had. I sat down hard on the top step, the papers scattered around me. Everything made sense now. Why Samantha was so confident about getting rid of me. Why she felt she could treat me like hired help in what she thought was her own home. She didn't know about the ownership papers any more than I had. But there was something else in the folder. Something that made my blood run cold. A life insurance policy on me that I didn't remember signing. $500,000 with Michael as the beneficiary, dated just 2 months after I'd moved into my apartment. I stared at the signature on the bottom of the policy. It looked like mine, but I had no memory of signing it. Had I been so trusting, so desperate to help my son, that I'd signed papers without reading them? Or had something else happened? The conversation I'd overheard earlier came back to me. "Don't worry, honey. After tomorrow, we won't have to deal with this anymore." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in the quiet hallway. I gathered up the papers with trembling hands and made my way back downstairs to the kitchen. Tomorrow, 30 people would come expecting a feast. They'd find chaos instead, because I wouldn't be here to clean up the mess I'd spent my entire adult life enabling. But more than that, I'd be somewhere safe, while I figured out exactly what my son and his wife had been planning for me. I looked at the kitchen one more time, at all the food I'd prepared, at the spotless counters and perfectly organized dishes. This would be the last time I'd ever do this for them. Because tomorrow, Patricia Williams was going to disappear, and with her would go everything they'd taken for granted. I picked up my phone and confirmed my flight reservation. Time to go. I had 3 hours before my flight to San Diego. 3 hours to execute the most important plan of my life, and I intended to make every minute count. Back in the kitchen, I spread all the documents across the counter under the warm glow of the pendant lights. The house deed showed my 60% ownership clear as day. The life insurance policy felt like evidence of something much darker than simple financial planning. But there was one more document that made everything crystal clear. A power of attorney form with my forged signature, dated just last month. My hands trembled as I read it. This document would have given Michael complete control over my finances, my medical decisions, my entire life. The signature looked convincing, but I knew I'd never signed such a thing. I wasn't that far gone yet, despite what they apparently thought. Looking at these papers, a terrifying picture emerged. They hadn't just been planning to get rid of me socially, they'd been planning to get rid of me permanently. The life insurance policy, the power of attorney, Samantha's confident declaration that they wouldn't have to deal with me after tonight. It all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. I forced myself to think clearly. I had evidence, but I needed more. I needed to know exactly what they'd been planning before I disappeared forever. Quietly, I climbed the stairs again and stood outside their bedroom door. I could hear Michael's deep breathing, the sound of someone sleeping without a care in the world. The same man who used to have nightmares after his father died, who would crawl into my bed seeking comfort. Now he was the source of my nightmares. I pressed my ear to the door and heard something that chilled me to the bone. Samantha talking in her sleep. Insurance money, nursing home, sign the papers. Her words were fragmented but clear enough. Won't remember. Pills in the coffee. Pills in the coffee. My coffee that I'd been drinking every morning when I visited them. The coffee that had been making me feel increasingly confused and forgetful over the past few months. I'd attributed it to age, to stress, to grief over losing my independence. But it hadn't been any of those things. They'd been drugging me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those times I'd felt dizzy during visits. All those moments when I couldn't quite remember conversations or felt strangely disoriented. It wasn't dementia setting in. It was deliberate poisoning designed to make me appear incompetent so they could take control of my life. And eventually, to end it. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it would wake them. I had to get out of there, but first, I had one more thing to do. In the kitchen, I pulled out a notepad and began writing. Not a goodbye letter. They didn't deserve explanations or closure. Instead, I wrote down everything I'd discovered, every document I'd found, every horrifying piece of evidence that painted a picture of their plan to essentially murder me for money. I sealed this letter in an envelope and addressed it to my sister Carol in San Diego, along with photocopies of all the documents. Then I wrote a second letter, this one much shorter. Michael and Samantha, I wrote in my careful handwriting. I know what you've been planning. I know about the forged power of attorney, the life insurance policy I never signed, and the pills in my coffee. I'm leaving, and I'm taking my 60% of this house with me. You have 30 days to buy out my share, or I'll force a sale. Happy Thanksgiving, Patricia. I left this note propped against the coffee maker, where they'd be sure to see it in the morning, right next to the pills I'd found hidden in the sugar bowl. The same pills that had been slowly poisoning me for months. Then I did something that felt like the most rebellious act of my 65 years. I began undoing everything I'd prepared for their perfect Thanksgiving. I took the stuffing out of the turkey and threw it away. I poured the cranberry sauce down the drain. I found the expensive wine Samantha had bought for her sophisticated guests and poured every bottle down the sink, watching the red liquid swirl away like blood. The pies I'd baked from scratch? I left them on the counter but removed all the sugar, replacing it with salt. The mashed potatoes were already made, so I added a few extra special ingredients: hot sauce, vinegar, and a generous amount of bitter coffee grounds. For the gravy, I got creative. Instead of the smooth, rich sauce I'd perfected over decades of cooking, I made sure it would be lumpy, oversalted, and completely inedible. The green bean casserole got a healthy dose of baking soda that would make it taste like soap. I worked methodically, sabotaging every dish while leaving everything looking perfect on the surface. Their 30 sophisticated guests would arrive expecting a gourmet feast and find instead a carefully orchestrated disaster. But I wasn't finished yet. I went to Michael's home office and used his computer to access the bank account he didn't know I knew about. The joint account we'd opened when I sold my house, the one that still showed me as a co-owner. Over the years, they'd gradually moved money around, probably thinking I was too confused or trusting to notice. They were wrong. With a few clicks, I transferred my portion of the funds to my personal account. Money that was rightfully mine anyway. It wasn't theft. It was reclaiming what they'd stolen through deception and manipulation. I also canceled the automatic transfers that had been paying for their car insurance, their health club memberships, and several other expenses I'd been unknowingly covering. They wanted to be independent? they could start by actually being financially independent. As I worked, I found something else on Michael's computer that made my blood boil. Email exchanges between him and Samantha from the past few months, discussing their plans in shocking detail. "The pills are working," one email from Samantha read. "She's getting more confused every day. Dr. Richard says we can probably get her declared incompetent within the month." Michael's response was even worse. "Good. I can't stand watching her struggle anymore. It'll be a mercy when it's over. And the insurance money will set us up for life." A mercy. They called murdering me a mercy. I printed out every single email and added them to the envelope for Carol. Then I did something that would have seemed impossible to the woman I'd been just 12 hours ago. I smiled. They thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so much smarter than the old woman who'd raised one of them and been slowly poisoned by the other. They thought they could drug me into compliance, forge my signature, and eventually kill me for an insurance payout, all while making it look like natural causes or the tragic end of a confused old woman. They had severely underestimated Patricia Williams. I checked my watch. 1 hour until my taxi arrived to take me to the airport. 1 hour before I disappeared from their lives forever, leaving behind only chaos and consequences. I packed my single small suitcase with the few things that mattered to me. Photos of Michael as a child, back when he still loved me, my wedding ring from David, and the documents that would ensure justice was served. As I took one last look around the kitchen where I'd spent so many hours sacrificing my sleep and my health for people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their greed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. For the first time since David died, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, what I needed, what I deserved, not what would make someone else happy or comfortable or wealthy. I was taking my life back. The taxi would arrive in 45 minutes. In 6 hours, I'd be in San Diego with my sister, safe from their schemes. By the time they woke up and discovered my note, I'd be 3,000 miles away, and their perfect Thanksgiving would be descending into chaos. But the best part? They'd have no idea where I'd gone or what I was planning next. I sat down at the kitchen table one more time and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow, 30 people would arrive expecting to be impressed by Michael and Samantha's hospitality. Instead, they'd witness a complete meltdown, and somewhere far away, I'd finally be free to live the life I'd postponed for 37 years. The only question now was whether they'd have the nerve to call the police when they discovered I was gone, knowing that any investigation would uncover their plot against me. Somehow, I doubted it. The taxi arrived at exactly 4:30 in the morning. I watched through the kitchen window as the headlights swept across the driveway. And for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about something. The driver was a middle-aged woman who helped me with my single suitcase without asking questions about why an elderly woman was leaving for the airport before dawn on Thanksgiving morning. "Flying somewhere nice for the holiday?" she asked as we pulled away from the house. "San Diego," I said, watching Michael and Samantha's house disappear in the rearview mirror. "I'm going to see my sister." What I didn't tell her was that I was also fleeing for my life. The flight to San Diego was smooth and uneventful. I spent most of it staring out the window, thinking about the chaos I'd left behind and what would unfold over the next few hours. I'd timed everything perfectly. My flight departed at 6 a.m., which meant I'd be safely in California by the time Michael and Samantha woke up to discover my note. Carol was waiting for me at the airport, just like she'd promised when I called her from the plane. My younger sister had always been the rebel in our family, the one who spoke her mind and refused to let people walk over her. When I told her what had been happening, she didn't express surprise so much as fury. "I knew that woman was poison the first time I met her," Carol said as we drove to her house in La Jolla. "And Michael. God, Patricia, I can't believe he would do this to you." "Neither could I admitted. "Even with all the evidence right in front of me, part of me still can't believe my own son was planning to kill me." Carol's jaw tightened. "We're going to make sure he pays for this. All of it." While I settled into Carol's guest room, my phone began ringing. The first call came at 8 a.m. Pacific time, which meant it was 11 back in Chicago. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom?" Michael's voice sounded panicked. "Mom, where are you? We found your note and we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding." Please call me back. The second call came 20 minutes later. Patricia, this is Samantha. Her voice was tight with controlled rage. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you need to come back here immediately. We have guests arriving in 3 hours and no food. This is completely unacceptable behavior. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Unacceptable behavior. After months of poisoning me and planning my murder, she was concerned about my behavior. The third call came from Michael again, and this time he sounded desperate. Mom, please. I know you're upset, but running away isn't going to solve anything. We can work this out. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. I love you. I would never hurt you. But I knew better now. Love doesn't look like forged signatures and poison in coffee cups. Carol and I spent the morning reviewing all the documents I'd brought with me. She helped me organize everything into a coherent timeline. The house sale and hidden ownership, the forged power of attorney, the suspicious life insurance policy, the emails discussing my incompetence, and the evidence of the drugging. This is attempted murder, Carol said flatly. We need to call the police. Not yet, I said. I want to see how this plays out first. They still don't know I'm in California or that I've uncovered everything. Let them dig themselves deeper. Around noon, my phone started buzzing with text messages. Michael, Mom, people are starting to arrive and the food is inedible. What did you do? Samantha, you've humiliated us in front of Michael's colleagues. I hope you're proud of yourself. Michael, the turkey isn't even cooked properly. Mrs. Henderson from the law firm got sick from the mashed potatoes. Please tell me how to fix this. Samantha, everyone's leaving. The Thanksgiving is ruined. You've destroyed our reputation. I showed the messages to Carol, who grinned wickedly. Sounds like your sabotage worked perfectly. But the messages didn't stop there. Over the next few hours, they escalated from frustrated to angry to panicked. Michael, Mom, we checked the bank accounts. You can't just take money that isn't yours. This is theft. I responded to that one. Check the account ownership documents. It's my money. Samantha, we know what you're trying to do, and it won't work. We'll fight this. Me. Good luck. I have copies of everything, including the forged power of attorney and the emails where you discussed killing me for insurance money. There was a long silence after that message. The next call didn't come until evening, and it was from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Williams? This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Chicago Police Department. Your son Michael called us about a family dispute. He's claiming you've stolen money and are making false accusations. We'd like to speak with you. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. I'm in California visiting my sister, Detective, and I haven't stolen anything, but I do have evidence of attempted fraud and conspiracy to commit murder that I'd be happy to share with you. There was a pause. Ma'am? Those are serious allegations. Yes, they are. I have documented evidence of my son and daughter-in-law planning to have me declared incompetent through drugging, forge legal documents to control my finances, and ultimately kill me for a life insurance payout. I also have emails between them discussing these plans in detail. Another pause. We'll need to see this evidence. I'll be happy to provide it, but Detective, you should know that I'm also the legal owner of 60% of the house they're living in, and they've been lying about that for 3 years. Nothing they've told you about this being theft is accurate. After I hung up, Carol poured us both a glass of wine. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it. Terrified, I admitted, but also free. For the first time in years, I'm making my own choices and standing up for myself. Even if I'm scared, I'm not backing down. The phone rang again around 9 p.m. This time it was Michael, and he sounded completely different. Broken. Mom, please come home. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out, Michael. You tried to kill me. That's not. It wasn't supposed to be like that. Samantha said it would be peaceful. That you were suffering living alone, struggling with money. She said we could take care of you, and when you pass naturally, we'd be set for life. I never wanted to hurt you. The admission hung in the air between us. He'd just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder while trying to justify it as mercy. Michael, I said quietly, you've been putting pills in my coffee to make me seem incompetent. You forged my signature on legal documents. You planned to control my life and then end it for money. That's not mercy. That's murder. Mom, please. I raised you better than this. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. I hung up and turned off my phone. Carol found me crying on her couch an hour later. Not tears of sadness exactly, but tears of mourning. I was grieving the son I'd thought I had, the relationship I'd believed was real, the family I'd sacrificed everything to maintain. He's not the little boy you raised anymore, Carol said gently. He made his choice when he chose Samantha's greed over your life. I know, I whispered, but it still hurts. It should hurt. That means you're still human, still capable of love even after everything they did to you. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No drugged coffee, no fear of what tomorrow might bring, no walking on eggshells around people who saw me as a burden. For the first time in 3 years, I felt safe, but I also knew this was just the beginning. Michael and Samantha wouldn't give up easily. They had too much to lose now that their plan had been exposed. The house, the money, their reputations, possibly their freedom if the police investigation went forward. They would try to discredit me, claim I was mentally incompetent, argue that I'd misunderstood their intentions. They might even try to have me declared a danger to myself for running away and making false accusations. But I had something now that I hadn't had in years: allies, evidence, and most importantly, the will to fight back. Tomorrow, I would call Detective Martinez and provide her with everything I'd found. I would also call a lawyer Carol had recommended who specialized in elder abuse cases, and I would begin the process of forcing the sale of the house that was rightfully 60% mine. Michael and Samantha had spent months planning my destruction. Now it was my turn to plan theirs. The difference was, my plan was built on truth and justice, not greed and murder. As I drifted off to sleep in Carol's comfortable guest room, 3,000 miles away from the chaos I'd left behind, I felt something I hadn't experienced since David died 37 years ago. I felt powerful. And tomorrow, I would start using that power to make sure no one ever treated me like a disposable burden again. The meeting with Detective Martinez took place 3 days after Thanksgiving, via video call from Carol's home office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened without interruption as I laid out the entire timeline of Michael and Samantha's conspiracy against me. "Mrs. Williams," she said when I finished, "this is one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've encountered. The premeditation, the documentation, the systematic nature of what they did to you. It's textbook attempted murder with financial motivation." She'd already spoken with Michael and Samantha separately. According to Detective Martinez, their stories had been inconsistent from the start, and they'd made several incriminating statements before lawyering up. "Your son admitted to putting what he called mild sedatives in your coffee to help you sleep better. He claimed it was for your own good, but he couldn't explain why he never told you about it or consulted with your doctor. And Samantha? She denied everything initially, but we found the pills hidden in your kitchen exactly where you said they'd be. We also recovered deleted emails from their computers that corroborate your evidence. One email thread discusses timing your death to coincide with holiday stress, making it seem like natural causes. My hands shook as I processed this. Even knowing what they'd planned, hearing it confirmed by law enforcement made it feel more real and more horrifying. "What happens now?" Carol asked, squeezing my shoulder. "We have enough evidence to charge them both with conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case now. But Detective Martinez had more news, some of it surprising. We've also discovered that this isn't their first attempt at something like this. Samantha's first husband died under suspicious circumstances 5 years ago. Natural causes, according to the death certificate, but he'd recently taken out a large life insurance policy with her as beneficiary. The case was never investigated because there was no one to advocate for him. No family members who questioned the circumstances. I felt sick. She's done this before? We believe so. We're reopening that investigation now. Your courage in coming forward may have prevented more deaths and helped us solve a previous crime. After the call ended, I sat in Carol's kitchen feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had been happening. I wasn't just a victim of elder abuse. I was a survivor of attempted murder, And my testimony might help solve another killing. You saved your own life, Carol said quietly. And maybe others too. The next few days brought a steady stream of developments. Michael's law firm suspended him pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Their social circle, who had witnessed the Thanksgiving disaster firsthand, began distancing themselves as word of the charges spread through their community. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Samantha's sister called me. "Mrs. Williams, this is Jennifer, Samantha's sister. I need to tell you something about what's been happening." Jennifer revealed that she'd been suspicious of Samantha for months. She'd noticed changes in her sister's behavior, secretive phone calls, and strange comments about planning for the future. "After your son called the police, Samantha came to stay with me. She was panicking, talking about how everything was falling apart. She kept saying it wasn't supposed to happen this way, that you were supposed to be grateful for their help." "Grateful," I repeated bitterly. "Mrs. Williams, there's something else. Samantha told me things that night that I think you need to know. She said she never loved Michael. She married him because he was successful and had a mother who owned property. She'd been planning this almost from the beginning." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it still cut deep. Michael hadn't just been manipulated by a sociopath. He'd been targeted specifically because of me, because of what I owned. "She also told me about her first husband," Jennifer continued. "She admitted to putting medication in his food that interfered with his heart condition. She said it was so easy because everyone just assumed he'd had a heart attack from stress." "Have you told the police this?" "I'm calling Detective Martinez as soon as we hang up. I can't be part of covering this up anymore. She's my sister, but what she's done, it's evil." That evening, I received another unexpected call, this one from Michael's boss at the law firm. "Mrs. Williams, this is David Chen, senior partner at Reynolds, Chen & Associates. I want you to know that we had no idea what Michael was involved in. We're cooperating fully with the police investigation." But he had more to tell me. "We've also discovered some irregularities in Michael's work. He's been embezzling from client accounts for the past 2 years. Small amounts, but consistent. We believe he was funding his lifestyle and possibly paying for services related to what he was planning." The hits kept coming. My son wasn't just a would-be murderer. He was also a thief who'd been stealing from his clients to finance his conspiracy against me. "The total amount appears to be around $80,000, Mr. Chen continued. "We're working with the authorities to return the funds to affected clients, but Michael will face additional criminal charges." After that call, I found myself wondering if I'd ever really known my son at all. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, seemed to be a complete fabrication. The real Michael was someone who could forge his mother's signature, poison her coffee, and steal from clients to fund an elaborate murder plot. 2 weeks later, Detective Martinez called with an update that changed everything. "Both Michael and Samantha have been arrested," she said. "Michael's being charged with conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Samantha's facing murder charges in her first husband's death, plus all the same charges related to you. What about bail?" "Denied for both. The judge considered them flight risks, especially Samantha given her history. They'll remain in custody until trial." The news should have brought me relief, but instead, I felt empty. Somewhere in a jail cell sat the little boy I'd rocked to sleep after nightmares, the child who'd helped me clean office buildings, the young man who'd promised to take care of me when he succeeded. That person had either never existed or had died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Carol found me crying again that night. Not from sadness, but from a grief so profound it felt like physical pain. "I keep thinking about when he was 8, I told her. After David died, Michael was so scared of losing me too. He'd wake up in the middle of the night and come check that I was still breathing. He'd bring me drawings he'd made at school, little pictures of our family with hearts around us. That boy was real," Carol said gently. "What happened to him later doesn't erase who he was then. How do I reconcile loving that child with the knowledge that he grew up to try to kill me for money?" "I don't know," Carol admitted, "but you don't have to figure it all out right now. You just have to focus on healing and building whatever comes next." 3 weeks after my escape, I received a letter from Michael in jail. Carol wanted to throw it away unopened, but I needed to read it. "Mom," it began, and even his handwriting looked different, smaller and uncertain. I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I understand why. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, what I became, and I can't explain it to myself, let alone to you. Samantha made it seem so reasonable at first. She said you were unhappy living alone, struggling financially, and that we could help you by managing your affairs. She said when you passed away naturally, we'd be in a position to honor your memory properly. But somewhere along the way, it changed. The pills went from helping you sleep to making you confused. The legal documents went from protecting you to controlling you. And the timeline went from waiting for natural death to causing it. I kept telling myself it was mercy, that you were suffering and we were helping. But I know now that was a lie I told myself, because I was too weak to stop what was happening and too greedy to walk away from the money. I destroyed everything good in my life for money I didn't even need. I had a successful career, a nice house, respect in the community. But it was never enough for Samantha, and I was too scared of losing her to say no to her plans. I know this doesn't excuse anything. I know saying I was manipulated doesn't change the fact that I chose to poison my own mother, chose to forge your signature, chose money over your life. I'm going to prison for a long time, and I deserve every day of it. But I want you to know that somewhere inside me, that little boy who used to be afraid you'd die still exists. He's the part of me that's grateful you escaped, grateful you were smarter and stronger than we gave you credit for. I love you, Mom. I always have, even when I was trying to kill you. I know that makes no sense, but it's the truth. I don't expect you to write back or visit or forgive me. I just wanted you to know that losing you was the worst punishment I could have received. Worse than prison, worse than losing everything else. Take care of yourself. You deserve happiness and peace, things I tried to steal from you. Michael. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Carol waited patiently while I processed it, then asked gently, "How do you feel?" "Broken," I said honestly. Part of me wants to forgive him, to believe that he really was manipulated by Samantha. But another part of me knows that he made conscious choices every single day to participate in poisoning me, to lie to me, to plan my death. Both things can be true, Carol said. He can be genuinely sorry and still be responsible for what he did. The letter sat on Carol's kitchen table for days while I decided what to do with it. Eventually, I put it in the box with all the other documents from this nightmare, evidence of the worst betrayal of my life, but also proof of my survival and strength. I wouldn't write back. Michael had said he didn't expect me to, and he was right. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. But I would keep the letter as a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, people could sometimes find their way back to the truth. Michael had finally acknowledged what he'd done without excuses or justifications. It was too late to save our relationship, but it wasn't too late for him to become a better person in prison than he'd been on the outside. As for me, I was learning that forgiveness wasn't something I owed anyone, not even my own son. What I owed myself was safety, peace, and the chance to build a life free from people who saw me as expendable. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first. And it felt like coming home to a person I'd almost forgotten existed, Patricia Williams, the woman who'd survived widowhood, raised a child alone, and built a life through sheer determination. That woman deserved so much better than what she'd been accepting. Tomorrow, I would start giving her the life she'd always deserved. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving night, I stood in the living room of my new house in Encinitas, California, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and pink. The house was modest but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a sunny kitchen, and a small garden where I'd already planted tomatoes and herbs. It was mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. The forced sale of the Chicago house had gone through 2 months earlier. Michael and Samantha's lawyer had tried to fight it, but the documentation was too clear. I owned 60%, and as a co-owner, I had the right to force a sale if I chose not to continue the arrangement. They'd gotten their 40% of the proceeds, minus legal fees and the money they owed me for utilities and expenses I'd been covering without knowing it. After all the calculations, I'd walked away with enough money to buy this house outright, and still have a comfortable nest egg for the first time in decades. The trials were scheduled to begin next month. Michael had taken a plea deal, 15 years for conspiracy, fraud, and embezzlement. His lawyer had convinced him that fighting it would likely result in a longer sentence, especially with Samantha's murder trial casting additional suspicion on their conspiracy. Samantha was fighting her charges. Her defense team was claiming that Michael had manipulated her, that she was as much a victim as I was. Given what I knew about her first husband's death and her calculated targeting of Michael because of my property ownership, I doubted any jury would believe that story. Detective Martinez had called last week with an update. The investigation into Samantha's first husband's death had uncovered evidence that she'd been systematically poisoning him for months before his heart attack, using medications that would be nearly impossible to detect in a standard autopsy. The case had been officially reclassified as homicide. "You saved lives by coming forward," Detective Martinez had told me. "There's no telling how many more people she might have targeted if her plan with you had succeeded." The thought still made me shiver. I'd been so close to becoming another natural death in Samantha's wake of destruction. But today wasn't about dwelling on what almost happened. Today was about celebrating what I'd built from the ashes of that nightmare. Carol knocked on my front door, carrying a bouquet of flowers from her garden and a bottle of champagne. "Happy housewarming," she said, pulling me into a hug. "How does it feel to be a homeowner again?" "Terrifying and wonderful," I admitted. "I keep expecting someone to tell me I don't deserve this." "That's trauma talking," Carol said gently. "You do deserve this. You deserve every good thing that happens from now on." She was right, though it was still hard to believe sometimes. For so many years, I'd accepted less than I deserved, made excuses for people who treated me badly, and prioritized everyone else's comfort over my own well-being. Living with Carol for 6 months had been therapeutic in ways I hadn't expected. She'd helped me recognize patterns I'd fallen into, always apologizing, always accommodating, always assuming that my needs mattered less than everyone else's. "You were so busy being the perfect mother and perfect victim that you forgot to be Patricia," she'd told me one evening. "But Patricia is actually pretty amazing. She raised a successful child as a single mother, built a life from nothing, and survived an attempted murder with her dignity intact. Maybe it's time to get to know her." So I had. I'd started small, choosing what to watch on television without asking anyone else's preference, buying groceries I wanted instead of just what was practical, sleeping in on Sundays because I felt like it. Bigger changes followed. I'd enrolled in a ceramics class at the local community college, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I'd joined a book club filled with women my age who had their own stories of survival and reinvention. I'd even started dating, cautiously and on my own terms, but dating nonetheless. Robert was a widower I'd met in the ceramics class, a retired teacher whose wife had died of cancer 2 years earlier. He was kind, patient, and most importantly, he saw me as an equal partner rather than someone to be managed or controlled. "I don't want to replace what you had before," he'd told me on our 3rd date. "I want to be part of what you're building now." It was exactly what I needed to hear. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Carol and I looked at each other in confusion. I wasn't expecting anyone else. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, holding an envelope. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain latched. "Mrs. Williams? I'm Sarah Chen, from the district attorney's office. I have some documents for you regarding the upcoming trials." I unlatched the chain and invited her in, my stomach tightening with anxiety. Had something gone wrong with the cases? But Sarah was smiling as she handed me the envelope. "Actually, this is good news. Samantha's lawyer approached us yesterday with a plea offer. She's willing to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for life in prison without the possibility of parole." I sat down heavily on my couch. "Life in prison? The evidence against her in both your case and her first husband's murder is overwhelming. Her lawyer knows she'd likely get the death penalty if this goes to trial. This way, she avoids that risk, and you avoid having to testify." Carol squeezed my hand. "How do you feel about that?" I thought about it. Part of me had wanted to face Samantha in court, to look her in the eye as I testified about what she'd done to me. But another part of me was relieved to avoid reliving those months of systematic poisoning and manipulation. "I think it's the right outcome," I said finally. She'll never hurt anyone else, and I won't have to spend months in courtrooms reliving the worst period of my life. After Sarah left, Carol opened the champagne and poured us each a glass. "So," she said, settling beside me on the couch, "what's next for Patricia Williams?" I looked around my house, truly my house this time, at the life I was building brick by brick. Robert was taking me to dinner tomorrow night. My ceramics class was exhibiting our work at the community center next month. The book club was reading a mystery novel I'd suggested, and everyone was actually excited about it. I said slowly, I'm going to live, really live, for the first time in decades. "And Michael?" Carol asked gently. "Have you decided whether you'll visit him or respond to his letters?" Michael had written 3 more times since that first letter. Each one was shorter than the last, just checking in, telling me about books he was reading or programs he was participating in prison. He never asked for anything or pressured me to respond. He was just maintaining a thread of connection, in case I ever wanted to pull on it. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe someday, but not now. Right now I need to focus on healing and building this new life. Michael made his choices and now he has to live with the consequences. I can't fix that for him, and I can't sacrifice my own peace trying to." Carol nodded approvingly. "That sounds healthy." As the sun set completely and the first stars appeared in the clear California sky, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, sleeping on a kitchen floor, poisoned and confused, planning a feast for people who were planning her death. That woman felt like someone I'd known long ago, someone I felt sorry for but could barely recognize. The woman I was now had agency, choices, boundaries. She had friends who respected her, a sister who loved her unconditionally, and a romantic interest who valued her opinions. She had hobbies and interests and plans for the future that didn't revolve around making other people comfortable. Most importantly, she had learned that love shouldn't cost your life, your dignity, or your sense of self. Real love, the kind worth having, should add to your life, not diminish it. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Looking forward to tomorrow night. The restaurant has an ocean view. Thought you might like that." I smiled as I typed back, "Perfect. See you at 7. 6 months ago, the idea of dating someone new would have felt like a betrayal of my role as Michael's mother or David's widow, but I wasn't defined by those relationships anymore. I was defined by who I chose to be each day, and today I chose to be someone open to new experiences and new love. Carol left around 9, and I walked through my house turning off lights and locking doors. The bedtime routine was new but comforting, checking my own locks, turning off my own lights, making my own decisions about when to sleep and when to wake up. In my bedroom, I looked at the photo on my nightstand, not of Michael or David, though I had pictures of them tucked away in a drawer, but of myself at my ceramics class graduation, holding a vase I'd made with my own hands. My face was flushed with pride and accomplishment, and my smile was genuine and free. That's who I was now. Not Michael's mother, or David's widow, or Samantha's victim. Just Patricia Williams, a woman who had survived the unthinkable and chosen to build something beautiful from the ruins. As I drifted off to sleep in my own bed in my own house, I felt something I hadn't experienced since I was a young woman, excitement about the future. Not anxiety about what might go wrong or how I might disappoint someone, but genuine anticipation for all the possibilities ahead. Tomorrow, I had a date with a kind man. Next week, I was starting an advanced ceramics course. Next month, my book club was planning a trip to San Francisco. Small things, perhaps, but they were my things, chosen by me for my own happiness. For 65 years, I'd lived for other people. For however many years I had left, I was going to live for myself. And that felt like the most beautiful revenge of all. Not destroying the people who had tried to destroy me, but building a life so full and rich and joyful that their cruelty became irrelevant. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had set me free. And I was just getting started.